The Walrus and the Carpenter by Lewis Carroll. The sun was shining on the sea, shining with all his might. He did his very best to make the billows smooth and bright. And this was odd because it was the middle of the night. The moon was shining sulkily because she thought the sun had got no business to be there after the day was done. It's very rude of him, she said, to come and spoil the fun. The sea was wet could be, the sands were dry as dry. You could not see a cloud because no cloud was in the sky. No birds were flying overhead, there were no birds to fly. The Walrus and the Carpenter were walking close at hand. They wept like anything to see such quantities of sand. If this were only cleared away, they said it would be grand. If 7 maids with 7 mops swept it for half a year. Do you suppose, the Walrus said, that they could get it clear? I doubt it, said the Carpenter, and shed a bitter tear. Oh, oysters, come and walk with us, the Walrus did beseech. A pleasant walk, a pleasant talk along the briny beach. We cannot do with more than 4, to give a hand to each. The eldest oyster looked at him, but never said a word. But never a word he said. The eldest oyster winked his eye and shook his heavy head, meaning to say he did not choose to leave the oyster bed. Out 4 young oysters hurried up, all eager for the treat. Their coats were brushed, their faces washed, their shoes were clean and neat. And this was odd because, you know, they hadn't any feet. 4 other oysters followed them, and yet another 4. And thick and fast they came at last, and more, and more, and more, all hopping through the frothy waves and scrambling to the shore. The Walrus and the Carpenter walked on a mile or so, and then they rested on a rock conveniently low, and all the little oysters stood and waited in a row. The time has come, the Walrus said, to talk of many things, of shoes and ships and sealing wax, of cabbages and kings, and why the sea is boiling hot, and whether pigs have wings. But wait a bit, the oysters cried, before we have our chat, for some of us are out of breath, and all of us are fat. No hurry, said the Carpenter, they thanked him much for that. A loaf of bread, the Walrus said, is what we chiefly need. Pepper and vinegar besides are very good indeed. Now if you're ready, oysters dear, we can begin to feed. But not on us, the oysters cried, turning a little blue. After such kindness, that would be a dismal thing to do. The night is fine, the Walrus said, do you admire the view? It was so kind of you to come, and you are very nice. The Carpenter said nothing but, cut us another slice. I wish you were not quite so deaf. I've had to ask you twice. It seems a shame, the Walrus said, to play them such a trick, after we brought them out so far and made them trot so quick. The Carpenter said nothing, but the butter spread too thick. I weep for you, the Walrus said, I deeply sympathize. With sobs and tears he sorted out those of the largest size, holding his pocket handkerchief before his streaming eyes. Oh, oysters, said the Carpenter, you've had a pleasant run. Shall we be trotting home again? But answer came there none. And this was scarcely odd, because they'd eaten every one. In text 1, Carroll's poem, what central idea emerges from stanzas 16 and 17? A. The Carpenter is disappointed by the oyster's failure to join the conversation. B. The Walrus feels somewhat conflicted over tricking the oysters. C. The oysters trick Walrus and Carpenter and follow their orders exactly. D. The oysters are too tired to be aware of the danger posed by the Walrus and the Carpenter. Question 2, Part A. In text 1, how does Carroll develop a pattern of surprise? A. He uses dialogue to reveal confusing and ridiculous situations. B. He provides detailed explanations of things that are not important. C. He gives clues that hint at what will happen to each character. D. He provides hints that show how things are not as predictable as they first seem. Part B. Which two stanzas from text 1 best support the answer to part A? A. Stanza 1. B. Stanza 3. C. Stanza 5. D. Stanza 8. E. Stanza 11. F. Stanza 15. Question 3, Part A. In text 1, what is one effect of Carroll's word choice on the overall tone of the poem? A. His deliberate description of exaggerated emotion creates a humorous tone. B. His thoughtful description of each character creates a cheerful tone. C. His purposeful use of rhyme and meter creates a sympathetic tone. D. His careful use of dialogue creates a thoughtful tone. Part B. Which three stanzas best establish the tone you identified in Part A? A. Stanza 1. B. Stanza 4. C. Stanza 5. D. Stanza 8. E. Stanza 11. F. Stanza 17. Question 4, Part A. Which statement best expresses one of the themes of text 1? A. It is usually good to take a risk. B. Friendships can be more rewarding than expected. C. Happiness can be found in unusual circumstances. D. Be wary of strangers and careful with trust. D. Be wary of strangers and careful with trust. Part B. Which lines from text 1 best support the correct answer to Part A? A. The sea was wet as wet could be, the sands were dry as dry. You could not see a cloud because no cloud was in the sky. B. Oh, oysters, come and walk with us, the walrus did beseech. A pleasant walk, a pleasant talk along the briny beach. C. The eldest oyster winked his eye and shook his heavy head, meaning to say he did not choose to leave the oyster bed. D. The time has come, the walrus said, to talk of many things, of shoes and ships and sealing wax, of cabbages and kings. Text number 2. The Walrus and the Carpenter head back, by J.T. Holden. The moon was shining on the sea, so to eclipse the sun, she did her very best to make the billows roughly run, and this was odd because, of course, the day had just begun. The sun was sulking in the gloom that swallowed up his light, and set the skies he painted blue in shades of blackest night. It's very rude of her, he cried, to do this out of spite. The sands were dry as dry could be, the sea was wet as wet. The air was foul and dank and thick with bittersweet regret, the sort that weighs the heavy heart and labors to forget. The Walrus and the Carpenter were heading back the way they'd come from but an hour past, when night was plainly day, before the clouds had settled in and filled the skies with gray. I did not think it quite so dark when first we headed out. Do you suppose, the Walrus said, they've rearranged the route? No question, said the Carpenter, his heart yet filled with doubt. Oh, come, my friend, let's rest a while, the walrus did implore. A little break to still the wake along this briny shore. We cannot take another step beyond another four. The weary builder gave a sigh. The weary builder gave a sigh, but not a word he said. Into the dark he trudged along, determined now for bed. His belly thick with peppered swag and vinegar and bread. But slower still their footsteps fell into the sinking sand, which rose and swiftly to their knees in striking countermand, whilst from the frothy breaking waves they came now, hand in hand. 4 dozen oysters followed fast, and yet 400 more, and thick and quick their bodies slick, they gathered on the shore. All circling round and closing in, more eager than before. Dear oysters, come and rally round, the walrus did beseech. It seems we've dipped into a rut along this brackish beach. It would be grand to lend a hand if 4 would give to each. The eldest oyster gazed at him and raised a clever brow. The eldest oyster nodded then, for this he did allow. To lend a hand it would be grand, but which, to whom, and how? A coil of thread, the eldest said, is what we do require, to hoist them up and drag them out from 'neath this boggy mire. Some kindling too, and flint as well, to build a warming fire. But not too hot, the walrus cried, as flames licked at his feet, and yet the pyre burned high and bright, and ever so replete, whilst wafting scents into the night of sweetness sizzling meat. The time has come, the oysters cried, to settle down to tea, to break the bread and thickly spread the lard with zesty brie. A little spice, that would be nice, the eldest did agree. It was so very kind of you to grace us with this feast. But no reply the walrus gave, which scorned them not the least, for full his maw and thick his craw with vinegar and yeast. It seems a shame, the builder sobbed, to bring this feast to shut, to which the eldest did agree, and none there could rebut. And so they stoked the waning fire to satisfy their glut. O Carpenter, we weep for you, dear walrus, we lament, the boiling sea and cabbages, those kings of malcontent, the shoes and ships and sealing wax, and all that they ferment. A pleasant run you both have had, the sights that you have seen, but now we must be trotting home, they sighed with sated mien, and this was scarcely odd, because they licked their plates full quite clean. Question 5, Part A. Read the lines from Text 2, Holden's poem. O Carpenter, we weep for you, dear walrus, we lament the boiling sea and cabbages, those kings of malcontent. What does lament mean, as it is used on the lines above? A. Fear. B. Mourn. C. Worry. D. Suffer. Part B. Which word from stanza 17 of text 2 best helps the reader determine the meaning of lament? A. Weep. B. Boiling. C. Cabbages. D. Ferment. Question 6. In stanzas 3 and 4 of text 2, which tone is created by the words that are used to describe the setting? A. Soft and silent. B. Gloomy and threatening. C. Confused and anxious. D. Bored and apathetic. Question 7, Part A. In text 2, which statement best describes how the oysters feel when they see the walrus and the carpenter stuck in the sand. A. They are pleased their friends are in trouble. B. They are happy to see their old friends. C. They are excited that they may get revenge. D. They are curious to see what will happen next. B. Which lines from text 2 best support the answer to part A? A. Whilst from the frothy breaking waves they came now hand in hand. B. 4 dozen oysters followed fast, and yet 400 more. C. And thick and quick, their bodies slick, they gathered on the shore. D. All circling round and closing in, more eager than before. Question 8, Part A. Choose the main theme of text 2. A. There is a time and a place for everything. B. Violence can become a cycle. C. Oppressors should beware their victims. D. Life is often unpredictable. Part B. Choose 2 details that best develop this theme. The moon outshines the sun. The walrus and carpenter head home. Day is darker than night was. The walrus and the carpenter are tired. The oysters show no mercy. The oysters have tea. Question 9, Part A. In text 2, how does Holden transform the character of the carpenter so that the character is different than in text 1? A. Holden shows the carpenter to be more fearful. A. Holden shows the carpenter to be more fearful, as he expresses both anxiety and fear about his situation. B. Holden reveals the carpenter to be more motivated to get home, as he walks with a much quicker pace. C. Holden shows the carpenter to be more interested in forming a relationship with the oysters, as he attempts to speak to them. D. Holden describes the carpenter as more self-centered, as he doesn't allow the walrus to rest. Part B. Choose 2 pairs of lines from text 2 that best support the correct answer to Part A. The walrus and the carpenter were heading back this way. No question, said the carpenter, his heart yet filled with doubt. We cannot take another step beyond another 4. The weary builder gave a sigh, but not a word he said. Into the dark he trudged along, determined now for bed. It seems a shame, the builder sobbed, to bring this feast to shut. Question 10, Part A. In stanza 16 of text 2, what does the word rebut mean? A. Argue with. B. Put an end to. C. Offer forgiveness. D. Stand up. B. Part B. It can be said that Holden's poem rebuts Carroll's because he A. continues the story that Carol began. B. Echoes the tone of Carol's stanza. C. Includes some of his own events alongside Carol's. Or D. Reverses the fates that Carol gave his characters. Question 11. In text 2, how does Holden transform the characters from text 1? A. In text 1, Carol's poem, Eldest Oyster, is a passive observer, while in text 2, Holden's poem, he is an active leader. B. In text 1, Carol's poem, the moon silently seethes, while in text 2, Holden's poem, she directly tells the sun how she feels. C. In text 1, Carol's poem, the Walrus and the Carpenter do not feel regret for their actions, while in text 2, Holden's poem, they do. Part D. In text 1, Carol's poem, the reader must guess at why the characters take certain actions, while in text 2, Holden's poem, their motives are explained. Question 12. Which two things would a reader most likely fail to understand if they read Holden's poem without ever reading Carol's? A. How the moon and sun relate to one another. B. How the Walrus and the Carpenter meet each other. C. Where the Walrus and the Carpenter are heading back from. D. Why the oysters in Holden's poem act as they do. E. That Holden's poem is meant to be humorous. F. That Holden's poem contains unlikely or impossible events.